5:30, we'd like to call to order the meeting of the Board of Public Works on Monday, May 4th. Happy Star Wars Day to everyone. Give me one sec to move my agenda here. All right, so tonight attending our meeting, City Engineer Mike Bisbach, Dave Wilborn, Michael Granetsky, myself, Dave Herbst, and zooming in, we have Sarah Schrader or Schroeder?
Schroeder, thank you.
Schroeder, okay. Schroeder. Thank you, Sarah. And Kim, could each of you introduce, welcome you to the Board of Public Works. Kim and Sarah, could you maybe just give us a little background for the crowd of one or two that watches our meetings, so they'll get introduced to you. Kim, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Kim Lobdell, and I am currently employed by KL Engineering. I am the president and owner of KL Engineering, or partial owner. I do have some other owners now. I wanted to make that clear that I did talk with Mike, and he talked with the city attorney. And anytime there is anything on the agenda that is related to work that KL Engineering is doing, I will recuse myself and not participate in the discussion at all. So I am a licensed civil engineer in the state of Wisconsin. I have been practicing civil engineering for, let's just say, over 40 years. I'll give you some kind of a relative idea how long I've been here. Specialty has always been transportation, but do all types of civil engineering infrastructure, water, sewer, stormwater, site development, traffic, run the whole gamut of, as you know from Board of Public Works, the necessary side of civil engineering, but sometimes not the most glamorous side of civil engineering. I've been living in Fitchburg for 25 years and have been on various commissions. I was on Planning Commission for a long time. Took a little hiatus as I was trying to grow the business, and then most recently, probably for the last 6 or 7 years, have been on the Transportation and Transit Commission. So I'm familiar with most of the city staff and the processes and procedures, and really looking forward to working with the Board of Public Works.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that background. Sarah?
Yes, so I work at CUNA Mutual as a marketing manager, so not enough experience with kind of the engineering aspect, but I've been a resident of Fitchburg for a little less than 20 years, I think 17 years, and the District 3 Alder for 1 full year, and I'm entering my 2nd year right now. I got involved with being an alder from being on the Parks Department Commission for several years and just really enjoying it and enjoying watching how Fitchburg is growing and how residents use the parks and use the city. Looking forward to being on Public Works. I have a lot to learn. I know I just watched the meeting from 4-6 and have been trying to look through previous notes to get caught up, but realize that a lot of projects come through, and part of Fitchburg growing is that Public Works is just very, very busy. But looking forward to it.
Thank you, Sarah. Again, welcome to you two. I'm glad to continue to have Michael and Dave on the board with us. I would just like to say, for the two of you on the board, there's many things we'll be going over. Don't hesitate to ask questions. We've been on the board a while. Some of these things might seem mundane, but I would encourage you to ask questions. I'm going to make a priority, with Mike to some things maybe explain a little more as we go along. But the one thing I would like to request is that we do have good debate and discussion on everything. We may come out of this meeting, we're not going to agree on everything, but never make it personal. But it's important that we have dialogue, good dialogue, points of view discussed, and we make our decision and we move on. We won't agree on everything. We may agree on nothing, but we'll do our job the best of our abilities. And again, happy to have all you on the board and look forward to working with you here the next year. All right. Next on the agenda, we had public appearances for non-agenda items, which we have none. I don't think anyone is Skyped in. Okay. So next, approval of minutes from the April 6th Board of Public Works meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
To approve.
I'll second it.
Okay, approved by Granetsky, second by Wilborn. Any discussion? Okay. Anyone? Seeing none? Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, minutes are approved. Next on item, review items. What are our review items that we have here?
Typically, if there's bills,
Okay,
we would review them, but
we don't have any on this time.
no.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the report of our city engineer, Mike, and update on what we have going on.
Okay, I'll kind of run down the list of the major things, and then if you guys have questions about anything else, just let me know. But Fish Hatchery Road, progressing nicely. Lots of work going on. We're gonna actually maybe see some concrete the end of this week, early next week up at Greenway Cross. So no hiccups, no big unknowns found at this point in time, so that's good. That project's progressing. Traffic's picking back up out there as things start to kind of return to the new normal maybe, but still manageable at this point in time, so that's a good thing. Central Park Place in Uptown is shut down for a couple weeks. The contractor had a commitment somewhere else that he had to get a project done, so they're not working for the next couple weeks out in that neck of the woods, but we'll be back probably mid-May. The Fahey Glen Promega project is progressing nicely. You'll see a lot of curb and gutter poured out there. We're thinking starting next week, we should have asphalt. So that'll really start taking shape. A lot of the sidewalks poured now, a lot of the pathways in, really starting to take shape. And that's got a June 1st completion date. Commerce Park Drive, they started last week drilling to prepare for blasting for the utilities. That'll continue probably through most of this week, and then hopefully they'll start utility installation either late this week or early next. Terra Vesa, they're currently pouring a lot of sidewalk, trying to get things ready for acceptance of public improvements, trying to get a few trails done, finish up the stormwater work for that current phase. Lots of buildings going in out there at the same time, so it's important that they get public improvements accepted so they can get occupancy. Juice plant, the dairy redevelopment, you'll see that footings and foundations are going in. It's really gonna change the look of Fish Hatchery Road along with what we've got there at the Plesco building across the street and the Park Bank redevelopment when that happens. So lots of exciting things. Looks a lot different now that we have the Pike Drive, those trees removed, and that started to get shaped in there. Kind of giving a whole different look to Fish Hatchery. McKee Road, the state portion has been underway for quite a while. You'll see a lot of work going on. Our portion, which is from Commerce to the east, is underway. We think this Friday we should have a shift in traffic at Seminole. We're going to be moving the Seminole traffic to the west side of Seminole to allow for work on the east side of Seminole at that intersection. And then in a couple weeks, we're going to be shifting the traffic over from the southbound lanes to the northbound lanes and working on the southbound lanes. Right now you see a lot of zigzagging, and that's because there's a lot of utility relocates going on, and they're a little behind, so we're trying to accommodate them to keep the schedule moving. So that's why you see a lot of switches and switchbacks on the traffic control right now. We're trying to get the utilities out of the way so we can really get going on the project. Sub-Zero Stoner Prairie Stormwater Plan, still moving forward. We're looking at a temporary pumping plan to draw down the big pond. And part of that is to just kind of see what kind of groundwater implications we have. Do we have perched groundwater? Is it, what kind of groundwater implications we have? How long is it going to take to draw that down? What kind of water are we talking about? So we're getting that approved with the DNR, and we're talking to Promega since they have ownership of the pond to try to facilitate that. As well, we're working with some neighbors. The solar farm, as it comes in, is willing to look at us being able to put some stormwater facilities or do some stormwater work on that property, as well as when Edgewood comes in, they're very favorable to deal with some of our stormwater and help us out with the situation and kind of be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So I think there's some exciting things coming forth as those two developments start coming forward, and we're working with the property owner as well to do some borings on private property so we can kind of gear up for that. Let's see. Lake Barney Stormwater Study last week was the first meeting we had with our engineer on board. It's Mars EOR. So it was kind of regathering the groups together, getting ready to have some actual stakeholder meetings. There's a lot of people involved in that project, so we'll be moving forward with that. But just kind of an initial, what we're looking to accomplish, how we accomplish that, and then starting to set some meeting schedules. Cyene Road, we have the RFP is due this Friday, or was due last Friday. Sorry, this is from the council meeting last week. So we will be evaluating those proposals, making a decision on hopefully interviewing 2 firms by this Thursday night and having those interviews, I believe, next Tuesday. Crack filling bids were received and awarded. Seal coating bids are open tomorrow. Resurfacing, we're getting bids out there. There's 3 special assessments. We're trying to get waivers of special assessment hearing, especially in this time since there's only 3. We think that we've talked to all 3 property owners, and we think we can accomplish that. So that would mean we wouldn't have to have a special assessment hearing for the resurfacing project. However, we will have special assessment hearings for Northeast Water Main Loop project, which will be coming out. And that would be putting water main on East Clayton Road up to through the Highway 14 corridor along MM to Terravesa, completing that loop. So we have some redundancy, better water quality, better fire flows for all. And that will impact probably 50 residents. So we'll have to figure out how we're going to do that hearing, because that number obviously exceeds what we can have. So we might have to have 10 at a time, maybe have different slots. So we're kind of reviewing how to accomplish that. And then I met with MG&E, and it's Transcanada Gas Pipeline down at the corner of Lacey and Seminole. There's 2 gate stations there for gas, and one is owned by Transcanada, and one's owned by, I think, Northern Illinois Gas. So we're also trying to get a meet with Northern Illinois Gas and do some aesthetic and maybe some sound improvements there, because that area is getting developed very rapidly and changing, and it's not very aesthetically pleasing when you look at those 2 gate stations. And in the winter, they do have a lot of noise complaints because the amount of gas coming through those pipelines, there's a lot of hissing, and it's not bad during the day when there's traffic, but at night when there's nothing else, that ambient sound can be irritating, and we'll get a lot of calls. And the other thing is that's where they inject the odor into the gas. So we do get calls on that. So we're looking at trying to come up with a plan for dealing with the amount of calls. As it gets more populated down there, we're going to get more and more calls on that. So we're trying to come up with a way to handle those efficiently and effectively so that we're ready for that as people start building closer and closer to those gate stations. And I think that's all I have on my report, but I can answer any questions if there's specific questions.
I have a question. Is the bike path crossing PD still open where they're in the city portion of the project, where they're going to be building the overpass?
It is right now. I think there is a point of time that will have to be closed, but I don't think that's occurred yet, Kim.
Okay, because there's so much going on there right now with all the zigzags and all the signs and all the barrels and I drive through there every day, probably 3-4 times a day. And you really have to concentrate on where you're driving and where you're going, because there's workers out there the whole time. I'm just a little bit worried about safety on crossing on that bike path, because there's so much going on there that to pay attention to bikes or pedestrians going through there while they're under construction is pretty difficult to do.
Yeah, and we had to address a couple concerns. One was contractors were parking really close to the trail, so then you really couldn't see people. So we've tried daily to tell the contractors they've got to park at least 50 feet away from the trail unless they're working right in the trail area, because that creates a visibility problem. And one thing, Kim, we could look at, and I can talk to Bill about, is to see if we can get something flashing or something to draw some attention to that crossing as long as it remains open, because I agree, we've had several discussions about and sometimes the bikers forget that it's a construction zone and people have a lot to be looking at and they think people are seeing them and they're not. So I think you're absolutely right.
I've seen that a couple times when I've gone through there. It's like they stop a little bit and cars are going slow because they're moving all around, and then all of a sudden they just go and they're right in front of you. So
Yep.
if we could maybe more clearly delineate it with some of the signing while it is still open, and just to draw the motorist's attention to it, I think that would be helpful, because there's a lot going on in that area right now, and it's hard enough to concentrate on where you're supposed to be for driving, and especially when the weather's bad. And we had that rain last week and it was all muddy and dirty and you didn't know for sure where to go, and then all of a sudden there's people crossing the bike path there.
Yep. Nope. We'll look into it and see if there's something reasonable we can come up to address it.
Thank you.
Excellent comment. It's a dangerous area for driving, and it requires a lot of attention for everyone there. Anyone else have questions for Mike?
Not
I had two, Mike. First one on Commerce Drive where we have to blast. Is that limestone that we're going through there? So it's not
It is limestone.
okay. Then on the other thing I wanted to mention, those gas gates that are down here, those were here, before the development. And I have a fair amount of experience with those. And the odorant, it's put in there for our protection, and some does. It's inevitable. You do get a little leakage, when the preheaters are working hard in the winter, and I'm not sure. We can maybe do something with the noise and the aesthetics. I'm not sure. The odor, maybe, a wall around it so it goes up. I'm not sure if we'll be able to do much with that. I just want to point out those were there before our development, and be nice. We didn't have to look at them, but they are part of the necessary infrastructure to keep our homes warm and our businesses, operating.
That's where like 70% of this area of the state gets their gas come through those two gate stations. So I think the odorant, the only thing is I think we should just be prepared with a plan for when those calls come into anybody so they know how to react to them.
Yeah.
And we've got to be cautious because we can't just dismiss it as that it's them placing odorant in there, but we want to, not be alarmist either. So I think it's just getting a plan in place to deal with it because there will be more calls. And I agree, they're very, very necessary, but I think as people get closer and closer to them, and they're willing to do some things, but it's who pays for what, and we've got to try to make that determination and see if there's even a reasonable and feasible solution.
Mike, do they inform you when they're putting that odor in or not?
They do not.
Kind of random. They have a gauge, and when it gets low, someone comes out and fills the tank, and sometimes a little gets spilled in that process, and they burn it off, and you try to avoid it at all costs, because if you get it on your hands, you can't seem to get that odor off your hands, but it does happen. Okay, thank you, Mike. A lot going on.
Yep, lots going on.
Concise summary. All right, moving on to our agenda items. First agenda item we have is Resolution R 48-20, granting a permanent limited easement for public path and lighting construction on the Nine Springs Golf Course Park property. Do I have a motion to approve?
I so move we approve resolution R-48-20.
Second by Granetsky. Mike, you want to?
Oh, I just want to, this is one of the items, excuse me, Chair, that I am going to recuse myself for, because KL Engineering did the right-of-way plat on this one.
Thank you, Kim.
Okay, so this is one we've talked about, I think, prior, but we had to get an easement from the parkland, and to do that, we had to go to circuit court because those that dedicated the parkland are no longer around. And part of the circuit court order is they want it to be a permanent limited easement, not fee title. And the TPP originally called it to be fee title, so this is changing that to be a permanent easement. And it is just to allow for the pedestrian walkway along Fish Hatchery Road. So I think it's non-controversial, but it is through the parkland, so this is a procedural thing that we've had to go through.
Any questions for Mike on this? A lot to do, for, quite a bit of staff time and research, so we appreciate the diligence on that. No questions, we'll call a vote. All in favor of Resolution R 48-20 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, resolution passes.
And I abstained.
Okay, one abstention, I'm sorry. Next, Resolution R 88-20, authorizing acceptance of the East Fire Station solar improvement bids. Can I have a motion to approve this resolution?
I'll move that we approve Resolution R 88-20, authorizing accepting of the East Fire Station solar improvement bids.
Moved by Kim, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Gronetsky. Mike, you want to give us a overview?
Sure. So as part of the CIP for the East Side Fire Station, it was kind of set up to have solar put on the roof. We prepared a separate bid. The plans and specs were prepared by Strand. The bid was advertised. 4 bids were received. Sunvest Solar was the low bid at about $170,688. We have sufficient funds. We've got a $29,000, roughly $200 Focus on Energy grant. This project will construct a 100 kilowatt solar panel system. And I know, Dave, you asked for a little bit of information on what this kind of system means as far as paybacks and whatnot. So, the net cost, when you take out the grant but then there's some tax even on the grant portion, is about $150,000. The cost of solar produced, the solar energy cost for 30 years is about, $150,250. The same cost if we purchase that from a utility would be about $455,000. So that's a savings in 30 years of about $305,000. So it's got a payback of about 12.3 years is what that amounts to when you look at it that way. And that offset, just to kind of put it in terms that everybody can kind of understand, is about the same per year is the same electrical usage as 11 homes, 72,700 miles driven, or 163,000 pounds of coal burned. So it's a pretty good savings as far as the environment, and then also, it's got a pretty good cash flow analysis.
Questions for Mike? I have a couple, as you would probably expect. So the cells, we figure that's at 30 years, they'll be depreciated or no longer producing depreciation. Okay, so do they have a decrement curve that we
I did not
add in there?
I did not see one. If they did,
Okay. So for people watching, it's a 100 kilowatt array. And based on the kilowatt hours they're anticipating producing, it's somewhere about a capacity of about 15% is what that translates to in this latitude. So if you looked at it, you'd say roughly 15 kilowatts continuously 24 hours a day, 365 days a year is what this would produce. And just roughly, around 18,000 a year in energy savings, I guess it would, if we looked at 15 cents a kilowatt hour, it's roughly 18,000 a year. My question is, I have no problem with this any other year but this year. Everything going on, in our city, not our city, but our country and businesses and everything. Do we want to do anything unless it's absolutely necessary, is the question I'm asking members on the board. This is a year where I say we really need to, if it needs to be done, we need to do it, but if it could wait a year or 2 years, this might be the year to make that decision. So I'm interested in the board members' thoughts on that.
I was kind of thinking that too, Dave, because you don't really know what's going to be happening. But the other thing is too, what is the cost gonna be if we delay this a year? Is the other thing. Mike, would you have any idea on that?
I don't, but I do believe, and I'm not 100% sure, I could check into this, I do believe that Focus on Energy grant has a deadline that would run out if we didn't do it this year. Not saying we couldn't reapply and get another one. I don't know the answer to that right now. I believe that was part of why we pushed it out early this year, is because we had a deadline with that.
Yeah, when it came out, I wasn't anticipating facing this. Michael, Sarah, Kim, any thoughts? Sarah?
I would have a concern of pushing this out just from the Focus on Energy grant, just that those are never guaranteed. And I know there's just as much likelihood of them being continued, but that would be a definite hit to have to lose that assistance.
Yeah, it'd be about a year and a half of production, out of all the field, and it would change the economics. The payback certainly would go up. Michael, any thoughts, or Kim?
My general thoughts on this are, the finance component. I've always said let's let finance worry about that stuff. I'm worried about it from the public works standpoint.
Okay.
My only question, Mike, was this the same vendor as the West Fire Station?
It was not, because we had to do research on their credentials, so I know that they hadn't done work in Fitchburg before.
Okay, so this is a different vendor than City Hall, the library,
Correct.
the other fire station. Any concerns with that?
Tracy checked out references and they all checked out good, so I don't.
Is this a different sort of array than we currently have? And again, I apologize, I don't know too terribly much about solar producers. If they're all the same producer, it's just a different company that's doing the installation. Is this a whole different mechanism that we need to be aware of?
I'm not super versed solar, but I would say it's very similar.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think there's a whole lot of technology difference between them.
Okay.
Mike, does it say in here what the warranty is on the inverters? That's always my fear. There's not much, unless it's a hailstorm and golf ball sized hail. The panels themselves are pretty durable, but the inverters sometimes, if there's system harmonics or things like that, and they fail, I'm just, if you have to replace the inverters, that's a lot of money, and I'm just curious if it tells us what the warranty is on the inverters.
It probably does. I don't know off the top of my head. I didn't see it when I first read through it.
I didn't come across either. Maybe you could
You can find out.
look into that and get back to us.
I agree with the comment that I think it's a good idea for us to look at what we're spending for the city of Fitchburg, this year especially. But then I guess I looked at this in terms of the grant and then starting the payback period, and something that Fitchburg is definitely going to probably do at some point or the other. And who knows what might happen to other energy costs, coal or that kind of thing, with this year too. So evaluating all of that, I do think that this is probably a good idea to move forward on this at this point in time. But I agree with your suggestion that we should be questioning anything that we sort of consider non-essential and see if it could be held back on a different one. But I did look at that, and I guess I'm comfortable with moving forward with this.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Then I'll call a vote. Hang on, let me page up here again. All right. All in favor of approving resolution R 88-20, accepting the East Fire Station solar improvement bid, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, resolution R 95-20, authorizing acceptance of the Burn Pond retrofit bid and budget amendment. I have approval of resolution. Someone move to approve resolution R 95-20.
Motion to
I move,
approve.
sorry.
Okay, moved by
I move to approve
Schroeder,
R
approved by
20
Ganetsky.
Authorizing the retrofit and budget amendment.
Are you froze up, Sarah? Can you see us yet?
Yeah, sorry, it looks fine on my end. I just was saying I motion approval of
Okay,
resolution
okay.
R-9520 authorizing acceptance of the burn pond retrofit budget amendment.
Okay, we have a second.
Second.
Okay, moved by Schroeder, second by Grunetsky. Mike, do you want to give us a background on this one?
Yeah, so this is the one, I think you guys remember last fall, we bid this at least twice, maybe 3 times, maybe once we didn't get any bids. Once we got one bid that was too high, and then again got one bid that was too high. So then what we did is, this spring, we decided to kind of revamp the whole project, redid the scope so we could be qualified for more, a Dane County grant as well as a DNR grant. So with that, we could kind of make the project actually a better project and get more funding available and actually build the project. I think we ended up with a better project. With that, even though there's a budget amendment, it's not necessarily a final cost to the city. It is because we have to pay and then we get reimbursed, but it's actually, we're not increasing out-of-pocket money because we got more grant funding. We got about $314,000 in the budget. We had allocated $150,000, that did not change. So with the grant, we had spent $24,000 on design, that left $125,000. We got a DNR match grant from the DNR for $32,000 and another $150,000 from Dane County, so that's $182,000. So we're basically gonna build this project for our same $150,000, but it'd be more like a $365,000 project.
Mike, can you give just a recap of the issue and the solution here for?
Yeah, so for you that don't know the burn pond, it's a retention basin, and we're turning it into an infiltration basin. And one of the problems it has a concrete channel running down the middle of it, so it has no real stormwater attenuation. It lets pretty much all the storms pass right through it. It will fill up, but most of the storms, even in the small storms, it doesn't hold anything back. So with this infiltration, we're gonna try to infiltrate some water into the system. We're gonna improve the water quality. We've got some gabions going in to take some of the sediment out. We've had complaints from the farmer downstream that there's a lot of sedimentation coming out of this pond. It drains a pretty large area. And then also this has gone through the Parks Committee, and Sarah, you probably remember this, that we're gonna be doing some filling and hopefully some improvement to the park, leveling up a little piece of park and doing some prairie planting to kind of define where the pond is, and then still allowing for some walking along the pond, for some trail type of activity. So I think all in all, we're really making a great stormwater improvement.
So, and I'll kind of also comment on this because I used to live out in that neighborhood. One of the challenges is that a lot of the development water a lot of the water from the development out there, Burnwood, would flow directly, basically through the neighborhood and just go out into farmland. And that was something that was kind of identified by Dane County as, trying to contain the water from the development, but this was just it seemed like this was one of those older developments where there really wasn't a plan other than just push the water downstream a little bit and let's let gravity and the sun take care of it. So you had a lot of development water going out onto farmland, which was, again, kind of causing unintended consequences for both the farmer, and then we also had a lot of runoff and water quality issues out there, standing water, all that other good stuff.
And we weren't slowing down the water at all, so we were getting a lot of erosion downstream. And then as well, because we weren't really holding any water back, he had a lot of wet area that he couldn't farm anymore. So there was a lot of different issues that I think this will help.
We don't, and the one thing about this one is I don't know how many other areas within the city that we would have a solution or a problem that we would need a solution like this for. kind of going back to the initial conversations, to Mike, your predecessor, and maybe even predecessor prior to that, it was always, trying to look at some of the different options in not necessarily in totality, but, just trying things out and going from like a swale, kind of slow the water down a little bit and then see if that worked. And, it just kind of seemed like we went from 0 to 60 really fast on this one.
Yeah, this was but this was an existing facility that was, I'm not sure why they had a concrete channel in the bottom of it. So as long as we're planning on part of the condition to get the grant from Dane County is that channel had to go.
Okay.
Because they really wanted the water quality component, which was the infiltration. So, and that's really the only way we can reduce the quantity and the velocity of that water. And we did some gabions where they're sticking up and they're kind of level spreaders, so it's spreading that water out, so we're not just forcing one single stream right through the pond, which is what is happening today. So a lot of what we did to get to where we're at was to also get some of that grant funding in there to be able to make this a doable project.
Okay.
Mike, do you know what the release rate is? I mean, before you said it wasn't holding anything back, so it was just going straight through. Have they designed it for a certain year storm or a certain amount of time to infiltrate?
They didn't. We didn't change the outlet structure per se, besides trying to do infiltration and then have these level spreaders. And we're trying to, have the water spread out through the whole basin. But we didn't try to fill up the pond and make, the one thing the neighborhood did not want is a wet pond whatsoever. So we couldn't really accomplish that with the outlet structure that was there. And then just the cost of, if we were gonna really make a big modification of that outlet structure, we just didn't have the budget.
Okay, so basically you're spreading it around and letting it infiltrate, so it'll just go out at a slower pace.
Correct. And we're doing some native plantings too to try to help with some transpiration and maybe help, promote infiltration that way as well. And the aesthetics of it. It's if you look right now, it's not a very aesthetically pleasing stormwater device.
Mike, so the stormwater utility, in our stormwater bills will be picking up $150,000. How much is coming out of the general fund or CIP?
That $150,000 is all stormwater utility. It's in the CIP, but it is paid for by the utility, and it's already part of those rates.
Okay, very good. That's the point I wanted to make. We do have, this is a very big concern in the city among very many residents. So, we've indicated we're going to take incremental steps to try to resolve, best we can these issues. And I feel this is a prudent use of the stormwater utility funds.
And we did have another public information meeting with the residents in the neighborhood, and they're very, very happy with the plan as it sits right now.
Okay. Thank you. You got this one thrown on your plate here, I think, the first day you were here.
I did.
Appreciate how hard you've worked. You've jumped right in and worked on a solution. We truly appreciate that. Any other questions? Okay, we'll call a vote. All in favor of resolution R 95-20, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, resolution R 97-20, approving First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the town of Verona to complete a study of Goose Lake. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
Motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Moved by Gronetsky, second by Wilborn. Mike, do you want to just give the background, give the whole background of the problem first?
So, as you guys know, they're on Fitchburg, down by where, if you guys don't know where the Madison lift station is, the Madison Met lift station, it's kind of just, south of the Nesbitt roundabout is the best way to put it. That floods in the underpass area, and what a lot of it is caused by Goose Lake, either being a backwater condition. We're not really sure whether it's a backwater condition from Goose Lake or if we need to do some downstream improvements to Goose Lake to move more water through Goose Lake. But in any event, We've done a few things. We've got rid of a culvert there at that lift station that was pretty much plugged shut, so it didn't let water get through. But as part of that was we need to determine whether we can do some outlet improvements in Goose Lake to move more water through and lower the level of Goose Lake so that it doesn't back up onto Fitchburg Road and cause that flooding. And it's probably, I think I gave a report one time, but it's probably an average at least once a year, I think, is probably what it amounts to. And especially the last 2 or 3 years, it's definitely been at least once a year. I know my first year it was at least twice, once for a pretty extended period of time, several days, and once for a very short period. But so we're looking at that, and then because Goose Lake is in the town of Verona, we don't have jurisdiction there, so it's a kind of a cooperative project, and we're splitting it 50-50 with the township. You guys had approved this intergovernmental agreement before, and so we went out for consultant selection. We accomplished that, and as we were looking into the project more deeply, and we had a consultant on board, and we're negotiating the contract, we found some flaws with the existing modeling that really need to get corrected to make sure that we're modeling what's actually happening out there. And certain things, as we dug deeper into this and we're looking at what we want to accomplish, we needed to add some more funding. And with that, we need to modify this agreement because half that funding is City of Fitchburg, half of it is the town of Verona.
Mike, who's a consultant that we brought in on that? You know offhand.
That is AE2S. I don't know if you've heard of them. They do a lot of stormwater work.
Okay.
AE2S is who it is. And we're looking at adding, it'd be like, instead of 15,000 a piece, it's 21,420. So does that another $6,420 per participant. So not a lot, but we need to modify this agreement so that, and the town of Verona will have to do the same before we can award the contract because it is a change. I do think it's, I would recommend approval. I think it's a project that now that we have the Nesbitt roundabout done, it's heavily utilized and it's a really great feature as far as traffic improvements. But then when it's flooded there, we kind of take away a lot of that ability. And as we're developing down that way, which you see a lot of, and especially with the road construction, you see a lot more traffic on Fitchburg because of McKee, and next year Lacey's going to be torn up. So you're going to see, changing traffic patterns all the time. So I think, we need to get this resolved. And we're looking at some point doing Fitchburg Road, and we want to have anything that we need to do as far as improvements to be able to incorporate with that project.
So Mike, what would be the time frame that the study would be done and you might be able to start doing any improvements from the recommendation?
What we're looking for, they're thinking this fall that they would have the study done, depending on how long our delay might go in getting this approved. Initially we thought they would be underway right now, but I still think late this fall, so we could do incorporations as soon as next spring. But the Fitchburg portion of the CIP, I don't believe is till 23 right now. So we'd like to, if we knew there was a solution that would solve the flooding by itself and it wasn't tearing up too much of Fitchburg, we would probably go ahead and do that ahead of time as a separate project, but we'd have to look at and see what kind of impact that has. It just depends on what it is. Is there 2 different culvert crossings? Is there 3? It might just all be an outlet structure on Goose Lake that has very little impact on Fitchburg itself. There are a couple culverts that we're gonna improve, but I think really right now we're really focusing more on downstream of Goose Lake and trying to draw down Goose Lake a little to have some retention. Right now Goose Lake I think is pretty much full. So there's not a whole lot, anytime there's a storm event, there's no storage there. So we're trying to create some storage in Goose Lake, and that really will take a lot of cooperation with the township because all those residents are town residents. So, and that was the other thing that we really added is there's a lot of angst downstream with some DOT projects. So we added another public information meeting. We did one initially before we get too far along so that we include the public comment right away in what we're planning. and then we added another one further on. So that was a cost because those public information meetings take a lot of preparation to do them correctly.
I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think it's going to be a easy or inexpensive solution. Just knowing the history of the area and the amount of sediment in Goose Lake, I feel like that's why it's sedimented in and there's not any more capacity because it's filled up over the years. But any questions for Mike on this? This is a very, if you talk to Fitchburg residents, when you talk about stormwater, this is probably the one, unless their house gets flooded, which, unfortunately, a few residents do. This is the one they know about the most. This is the one they've seen, affects, the most people, so. All right, then we'll call for a vote here. All in favor of approval of resolution R97-20 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Announcements, our next Board of Public Works meeting is May 18th. Does anyone know if they have any conflicts for that date right now?
Not I, I'll be here.
Oh, I'm planning to be here. Sarah, Kim?
I'm good.
Okay,
I should be good.
sounds good.
And if I can interject, so the process with this COVID thing has been typically the Wednesday or Thursday before we look at the agenda, the administrator and the mayor and myself, and determine, what's on the agenda and the urgency to have the meeting. If it's only very, no items tonight were controversial, but if these were important items, I think for the Board of Public Works, we had a bid. And the Goose Lake project, I think, is very important because it is important to the residents. But we look at those, we try to gang up on one meeting. So we make that determination whether we're gonna have a meeting or not, just so you guys know. So be looking for emails on the Wednesday or Thursday before, as far as whether the meeting will be held or not.
Mike, for the next meeting, if you could just give us a quick recap, our different street maintenance, the slurry seal, give us a recap of what our maintenance practices are on our streets.
Sure. So typically we've got several things that go out as part of the maintenance package. Is we have a crack fill where we route and crack fill any cracks that are working cracks. We route them so that we get enough sealant in there so that they will adhere and move with the crack and not leave a crack open. That stops water infiltration into the road base. Then we also have a seal coat, which puts a new wearing surface on the road. It does seal up minor non-working cracks. It's kind of a good wearing surface. It's a good aesthetic improvement, but it also gives you traction and does seal up smaller cracks. And then we have what's called the resurface, which can be a variety of remove and replace, pulverize and replace. It could be an overlay, depends on the street and the location. And we also have some curb and gutter sidewalk replacements that go in with that resurfacing project. And we'll have a separate sidewalk program to kind of correct trip hazards. And usually we try to gang those up every 2 years so we get enough quantity, because it's pretty expensive because they're spread out all over the city limits. But what we usually do is we look at what we're doing now anyway, is where we've had reported trip hazards, we definitely have to repair all of those. And then from there, we kind of branch out and try to get anything in that same area so that if someone's repairing a piece of sidewalk in that location, that we do everything in that area. The last thing we want to do is repair a square and then one block over and not miss a square. We want to try to, and then plus that gets us a little better cost because they're already there doing a square. And then we will do some traffic marking, some paint as part of that project as well, and that just varies as to where it is and where it's necessary. And then some of that we do with our own striper, like some crosswalks and whatnot. It looks like McKee, we're probably gonna look to add some quantity to the McKee Road project to stripe what was seal coated last year. When the county did that striping really is almost non-existent already, and because of the traffic volume, I think that's important, so we probably want to do some restriping on McKee as part of that project. So we'll probably have a change order to that project. It won't be huge, but I think it makes sense to do it when they're striping the rest of the project.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that narrative on what we do. I'm going to try to, again, I hope I'm not wasting your time, but, you know, we recap these things. You know, we have a lot of new residents in the city, and maybe a few of them are insomniacs that actually watch the Board of Public Works meetings, so we'll try to have some informational content all the time along with our normal business. We'll move to item number 8, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
I'll second it.
Second by Wilborn. All in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Meeting is closed.